Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another week of our Montgomery County House Delegation. We have a hefty agenda this morning. We're going to start with another late filed bill from Senator King. We've designated this MC 23-21, and I will turn it over to Senator King to explain why the bill is late.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here this morning to beg for your mercy to accept my late filed bill. It came back from bill drafting and wasn't correct, so we had to redo it, and that's why it's late.
I'm sure after this vote, we will all have a very friendly ear with Senator King when our bills go over to
Absolutely, you got it.
Chamber.
You have a friendly ear anyway.
Even friendlier. Jennifer, do you want to do a roll call vote? Just a reminder, it requires 2/3 for us to accept it.
I'm still trying to figure out the current people. Hold on, sorry.
No problem.
It's hard to follow all the windows. Okay. Is Delegate Acevero on? Absent. Delegate Barbe?
Yes.
Delegate Carr?
Yes.
Delegate Charkoudian?
Yes.
Delegate Crutchfield? Delegate Cullison?
Yes.
Delegate Dumais? Delegate Fraser Hidalgo? Delegate Gilchrist?
Here.
Delegate Kaiser?
Yes.
Delegate Kelly?
Yes.
Delegate Lopez?
Yes.
Delegate Love?
Yes.
Delegate Lutke?
Yes.
Delegate Moon?
Yes.
Delegate Polakovich Carr?
Yes.
Delegate Chi?
Yes.
Delegate Queen? Delegate Resnick?
Yes.
Delegate Shetty?
Yes.
Delegate Solomon?
Yes.
Delegate Stewart?
Yes.
Delegate Wilkins?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to be recorded as a yes if that wasn't clear.
I think that's how she recorded you, but Jennifer will record you that way.
Yeah, he's on there. Yep.
Great. And has Delegate Acevero joined?
He just needed the password, but he should be on any second.
Has Delegate Queen joined?
There is no password.
Okay, we're going to move on. Obviously, the bill was accepted for late file. This bill is oddly postured because it's an SB, not an HB. So we will wait for the Senate to act before our local committees take it up, I think, after talking to Chair Zucker yesterday. So thank you, Senator King, for joining us. You're welcome back in your own stomping grounds in the House anytime.
Thank you. And if you need any help on my side, give me a call.
Oh, you're going to be getting lots of calls now. So appreciate
Thanks.
it. All right, colleagues, we will now turn to, well, is Delegate Acevero here? Okay, colleagues, we will now turn to our voting session for the Land Use, Transportation, and Public Safety Commission. Chair Love.
Thank you, Chair Corman. Today we are bringing to you MC 2021, which is also HB 571, Montgomery County Disabled Active Duty Service Members, Disabled Veterans, Surviving Spouses, Property Tax Abatement. Mouthful. In short, in 2019, the General Assembly extended an already existing statewide property tax abatement for disabled veterans to include a disabled active duty service member. That law was effective as of 2019. When in fact, to help one of the original folks that the law was designed for, it should have been 2018. So this bill makes it retroactive to 2018. It passed through the committee unanimously. There are no amendments. Move favorable, Mr. Chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Delegate Acevero. Any discussion on the bill? Okay. All in favor of MC 20-21 signify by saying aye.
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 Anybody want to be recorded in the no? Any abstentions? Okay, the bill passes. Thank you, Chair Love. I believe that Delegate Acevedo is now here, so I will turn it over to Delegate Shetty for our public bill hearing. Chair Shetty. And thank you, Chair Love.
Thank you, Chair Corman, colleagues. It's good to see you all here today. We are going to hear Montgomery County Bill 2221 on voting methods requested by Delegate Acevedo. We have a number of witnesses signed up who have joined us today in support and in opposition, as well as informational. We will start by hearing from our bill sponsor, Delegate Acevedo, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, I will not take up the entirety of the 5 minutes because as I mentioned at our last delegation meeting, this bill was previously introduced. You are familiar with the bill. The intent of this bill, it is enabling language and it would allow for ranked choice voting for county elections and it would allow for the county council, the county to be able to look at this idea and how we could, and if they so choose to implement that they're able to do so. I don't need to speak, I think folks are familiar with just some of the arguments that have been made as to why, we need RCV and similar legislation. This was unanimously supported by the delegation last year when it was introduced. I appreciate the indulgence of each of you in allowing this bill, even though it was late filed for some miscommunication and whatnot. But I'm hoping that you would also, again, vote favorably on this bill that would allow for us to look at, examine, and possibly implement, if we so choose as a county, an RCV system. With that, Madam Chair, I appreciate the time to speak to the bill, and I urge colleagues for a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Delegate, for your sponsorship of this legislation. We will have questions now for you, starting with Chair Barve.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate Acevedo, in prior years for this bill, sponsors have accepted my amendment to include approval voting as another option in addition to ranked choice voting. I'm curious if you'll allow me to introduce that amendment again this year.
Well, thank you, Chairman Barbe. Let me just say that I am open to any amendment that would strengthen this bill and would allow for voters to have a greater say and certainly more options. So I'm definitely open to any and all amendments, both from you as well as from our colleagues.
Okay, I'll run it by you before I submit it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Barve. Delegate Resnick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate Acevedo, in the past, I understand how ranked choice voting works when we're talking about a single winner. And I've never had an issue with that. I know it works really well in places like Maine and other places. What I have always had a difficult time understanding, and I will have to say I'm pretty good at math, is how it works in multi-member districts, whether it's the county council at large race or our delegate districts, how the bottom receiving person's drop off is then recalculated in a multi-member district. And nobody's really been able to explain it to me in a way that I've been able to understand. So can you explain to me how that would work here in Montgomery County?
Yeah, I would rather, because I think we have someone, and correct me if I'm wrong, Madam Chair, but someone from the RCV Resource Center who may be on the call who would be able to answer that, or someone as well. I think it's a legitimate concern, Delegate Resnick. I appreciate the question, and I want to make sure we get the right answer for you. So let me see if we have.
We do have Chris Hughes from the RCV Resource Center testifying in informational. I think Rebecca is this person on the line for later. Yes, okay, I see him. Chris, do you want to answer Delegate Resnick's question now, or would you like to include that as part of your testimony?
I can cover it briefly now, and I'm happy to sort of answer more questions after I've testified, if that's helpful.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Chris Hughes. I'm the policy director at the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center. The short version of how multi-seat ranked choice voting works is it first and foremost, it's a proportional representation method. It's not like a winner-take-all election like we are used to now, where it's just a single winner where someone needs to get a majority, or if you're electing multiple people, it's just the people who get the people who can sort of consolidate the largest share of votes. A proportional representation method is trying to both award majority power to a majority. So, the majority group in a district will get a majority of seats, while also providing representation to minority groups that can't get a majority but are a sizable portion of the district. So in a 3-seat election, for example, each winner needs to get 25% of the vote in order to win a seat. So a majority can win 2 of those 3 seats because they have a majority of votes. They have 50% of the voters. And the 3rd seat would go to a group that comprises 25%. In some places that may be like, if it's a super majority place, if there's 75% of voters who are like-minded, those 75% of voters may win all 3 seats. In other districts, if it's a 60-40 Democratic Republican county, Republicans may get that 3rd seat. It's just a way of making sure that as many votes get used as possible. There's as few wasted votes as possible. And I can go more into the math as well, but that's the basic premise of how multi-winner ranked choice voting operates and the value it's trying to achieve.
So just so I'm not taking up everybody else's time, I very much want to go more into the math, because that's really where my question comes from. I understand the principles of it.
Yeah.
Maybe we can schedule a time when you guys can just sit down with me.
Sure.
I don't want to take up everybody else's time. Maybe if others have the math question too, they can reach out to you as well.
Thank you, Delegate President. We'll definitely do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Delegate Chi?
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a quick clarifying question for either Delegate Barbie or Delegate Acevero. What is approved voting, if I heard it correctly? I've never heard of that. Thank you.
Yeah, approval voting is where you can vote for as many candidates as you like. So let's say 100 people are running at large for county council, as might happen. And let's say you're a person who wants to support all the female vote candidates, and there are 18 of them running. You could vote for all 18 of them, or maybe you could vote for all the up county or down county people, or maybe, of course, the top 4 vote getters win, and you like 7 of them. You can vote for 7 of them. You don't have to choose which you like more than the other. It's just, it's not unlike what we do here in the Maryland House of Delegates, except in the House of Delegates elections, you only have 3 votes, and in approval voting, you can vote for as many people as you please, and the top 4 vote getters would win. I think it's more simple.
Thank you, Delegate Chi and Chair Barbe, for your questions. Okay, Delegate Moon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is actually to Delegate Resnick's question about the math of this. In another life, maybe a decade ago, I did spend quite a bit of time pumping ranked choice voting systems professionally. And so it's a very interesting question. And the reason why it arises is because I think we can all conceive how to do ranked choice voting for a single seat. You get someone up to 50% and you just keep eliminating people until someone has 50%. And in Tacoma Park, where we use ranked choice voting, we do use it in a multi-seat context, but they're district seats. So it's just 5 independent races where you keep doing this until someone gets 50%. In the Montgomery County context, what's unusual that Delegate Resnick is seizing upon is what to do when you're electing 4 or 5 people at the same time. And I will tell you that there are 2 different ways about this in the real world. In Cambridge, Mass, where they do this, they're physically moving. I don't know if they've changed it since then, but it used to be that they would physically move ballots around. Whereas in Europe, where this is used, say in like Scotland, they're doing fractional votes. And let me explain why that happens. Basically, you have to accept that the threshold to win one seat in a multi-member race is not 50%, it's 20 or 25%, in Montgomery County, depending on how you want to count it. So a very basic way of explaining it is you count the votes, and when someone hits 25%, they can't keep getting more votes. It's like a cup of water that you keep trying to pour more water into it, and you didn't stop counting votes for that person if they've hit 25%, and the water just flows down to other candidates. And the reason why different jurisdictions have different approaches is because you have to decide which ballots stay with that candidate and which ballots go to the other candidates if they've already won. And that difference for which ballots you choose to hit that 25% theoretically could change the outcome of the race. So again, in Cambridge, they used to randomly choose which 25 ballots stay with that first winning candidate, and then randomize the selection of which candidates get the second and third choice ballots. Whereas in Europe, they've just counted all of them together and said, all right, Mark Corman clearly won 25% of the vote. He's going to win. Let's figure out what percentage of his second choices went to Kirill. And then Kirill would get allocated a percentage of those second choices. This is, again, there's infinite variations on how you could do this, but that's basically it. You just accept that you don't need 50% to win, you need 20 or 25% to win, and then we'll figure out how to transfer those remaining ballots. I hope that helps explain the math of it.
Thank you, Delegate Moon. That sounds like a recount and audit lawsuit nightmare.
So
it's actually, people sit around at the bar in Ireland, or it's funny, ordinary voters in different countries have gotten quite accustomed to this. It's just, obviously ranking. It used to be more common in the US, but over time we've gone to a winner take all.
So just to clarify, Delegate Acevero, this bill enables the county to create a system, and they could then look at each of these varying methods using this enabling legislation. Okay, and then I have one other question, if I may. Is what version of this bill is this? Is this in the same posture that passed unanimously out of the county delegation last year, or is this as introduced last year, or some different version?
Yeah, so it's slightly different. I would say very similar to what we passed out of delegation last year, but with a couple of changes. But no, it is not in 100% in the same posture as the bill from last year, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I think the principal difference, I think, is that the bill that we passed unanimously had approval voting as an option for the county.
Got it. That's what I gathered was the main difference. Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Are there further questions for our bill sponsor? Okay, seeing none, we will continue with the hearing. We will hear from 3 witnesses in support, starting with Michelle Whitaker on behalf of the RCV Maryland Coalition, then Diane Hibino from League of Women Voters of Montgomery County, and then Michael DeLong. Michelle and Diane are speaking on behalf of 2 different organizations, so they each get 3 minutes to testify. Michael DeLong is speaking as an individual. He will get 2 minutes, and then we will take questions from the delegation to the support panel. Ms. Whitaker, would you like to begin?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So thank you, Chair Shetty, thank you, Chair Corman, and thank you, Vice Chair Carr, and members of the delegation for the opportunity to speak this morning in support of MC 2221 and also HB 7067. The promise of democracy is most often exercised through our individual and collective voice on the issues that matter in our community. It is a promise that we continue to fight for to make sure that we're advancing fairness and justice in our communities. Despite the progress that we've made, we continue to limit the voice of voters in a fundamental way, how we express our choices to elect officers, to elected offices. As a Montgomery County resident, I've heard from many of my fellow neighbors who are eager to expand the voice of voters through better voting methods. On behalf of Ranked Choice Voting Maryland, a grassroots coalition of advocates and organizations, we support this enabling legislation and believe that better voting methods are needed to allow jurisdictions to adapt and respond to unique dynamics in their communities. Ranked choice voting is an intuitive process. It is something that we do every day, from selecting a dessert, ordering coffee, to selecting and choosing what movie that we want to watch in an evening. It's what we do in everyday life, and it does empower voters when we see it in action in elections across the United States and around the world. When voters have the power to express their choices, our election outcomes are more reflective of the electorate itself. We want to make sure that we limit those limitations, eliminate those limitations that have created the spoiler effect, split voting, and increased toxic negative campaigning in a winner-take-all scorched earth environment. My testimony outlines how ranked choice voting works, but I want to focus a little bit more about the opportunity that we have before us to use better voting methods in Montgomery County. This past November, voters overwhelmingly supported ballot question C to increase Montgomery County Council's districts to adding 2 additional districts. While we do not know where these new districts will be in the county, they will likely be very competitive races because of these newly formed districts, because of open seats on the council, and also because of public financing, which has been an empowering source for both voters, donors, and candidates who are outside of the normal political process. New districts, all of this, and public financing creates the urgency for Montgomery County to be responsive to the upcoming 2022 elections and future elections as well. If the council were to pass this, a new voting method prior to the 2022 election, our coalition is confident that local election officials have the tools to run a smooth election, and voters will be informed of how that system will work. As I've noted in my written testimony, there is a cost-effective universal tabulator for tabulating results, and this tabulator has been federally tested and is open source to give administrators the tools they need to both audit and display the results. And I know our guests from the Resource Center will explain more of that. Just to speak to some of the discussion that's happened on like what, how this works.
I'm sorry, your time is up. Do you want to take a moment to wrap up, please?
Yes, I think it's time for us to give local governments the power to choose the best system for their communities. And I would encourage the delegation to do it again and support this, put their full support behind this bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Whitaker. Appreciate it. We will now hear from Diane Hibino from the League of Women Voters of Montgomery County.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this opportunity to speak this morning. I'm Diane Hibino, co-president of the League of Women Voters of Montgomery County, and we strongly support HB 767 that authorizes the Montgomery County Council to adopt a law to allow ranked choice voting to be used for elections for local offices in Montgomery County. The League was founded on the belief that voters should play a critical role in democracy. Ranked choice voting maximizes that ability by ensuring that winning candidates have support from a majority of voters. Ranked choice voting empowers voters because it allows them to vote for their true first choice candidates without feeling like they might have wasted their vote, and to select a second or third choice that's acceptable if they wish. It empowers elected officials because they will have a stronger mandate and more accountability when they know that they're supported by a majority of voters. Ranked choice voting encourages more civilized, less negative campaigns because candidates will need to appeal to their opponent's supporters for their second choice votes. It would have been very useful to Montgomery County voters in the Democratic primary election of 2018, for example. Voters had to select 4 candidates out of a total of 33 candidates to fill the county council at-large seats. The 4 winning candidates, who also went on to win in the general election, received only 12.2%, 9.6%, 8%, and 7.4% of the vote, hardly a mandate from the voters. Since we can expect a large number of candidates for county council in 2022, both due to term limits and going from 5 council districts to 7 districts, all parties would be better served by ranked choice voting rather than the current plurality or first past the post voting method. The League of Women Voters of Montgomery County strongly urges you to vote a favorable report on HB 767. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Ms. Habino, for your testimony. We'll now turn to Michael DeLong for 2 minutes, please.
Good morning, members of the Montgomery County Delegation. Thank you for hearing the testimony. I'm Michael DeLong, a resident and voter of Silver Spring, Maryland. Have been active in local politics and advocacy ever since I moved in here in 2015. I just wanted to add my voice in support of MC 2221, which would authorize the Montgomery County Council to adopt a ranked choice voting method or an approval voting method for certain elections for local offices if they choose. You've already heard 2 eloquent witnesses talk about the benefits of this. I just wanted to make a few more points. The council could adopt either of these voting systems for the election of county executive, county council members, judges, board of election members, and other positions. And in our current first past the post electoral system, candidates can win elections despite being opposed by most voters. This is not a good method in many cases because voters can be split among a lot of different choices. And in extreme cases, the winner can have a very low percentage of the vote. We all saw the 2018 primary campaign for Montgomery County Council, where there were 33 candidates competing for 4 seats. And this led to an absurdly divided vote where candidates won with very small pluralities. And this bill will give the Montgomery County Council the option and ability to adopt systems that are more representative of the voters and to ensure that people's voices are heard, even if candidates don't win. It can also ensure that the winners of future elections are more representative of the electorate. If ranked choice voting is adopted, it can promote diverse political viewpoints and encourage diverse candidates and backgrounds. It also has additional benefits. Ranked choice voting will minimize strategic voting when voters cast ballots for a candidate who's not their first choice because they think their favorite candidate is unlikely to win. It also allows voters to honestly rank their candidates in order of their choice because they know that if their top candidate doesn't win, their vote automatically counts for the next choice. Voters should be able to vote for candidates they support, not just against candidates they oppose. And also, this gives the Montgomery County Council a more local flexibility to adapt a voting system that they think best. I urge the delegates to support this bill and vote to give the Montgomery County Council the power to adopt these voting systems if they so choose. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeLong. We really appreciate your testimony. We will now turn to questions from the members of the delegation, starting with Delegate Shi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is to Mr. DeLong. Do you think if we had adopted ranked choice voting, the outcome of the 2018 at-large county council race would have been different?
Honestly, I do not know. I suspect it probably would have been somewhat different, but I am not entirely sure. It would have, I think it definitely, I think yes, but I'm not sure. So.
I think it's almost hard to answer that question, Delegate Shi, without knowing what voters' second and third choice options are, right? But I would, I don't really know either. Ms. Whitaker, would you like to provide feedback on that question?
Yes, I appreciate that question, Delegate Chi. One thing to note is that the election system is completely different. So the way voters approach it and how they're voting in the election, they're voting for candidates, or they're ranking their candidates. Because there's a different mindset, we don't really know how the outcome would be and if it would be exactly the same. But what we're trying to achieve, whether it's approval voting or ranked choice voting, is the opportunity for voters to more fully express their votes and their choices in an election. That's the main piece to talk about there. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's hard to compare like exactly what would happen in a system, because voters are behaving differently. But we do know that in both cases, with a new voting system, they would have more of their vote, their expression and their choices reflected in what happens in the outcome.
Thank you.
Delegate Shi, and thank you, Ms. Whitaker and Mr. DeLong for your answers. Do any other members of the delegation have questions for our support panel? Okay, seeing none, thank you to those who have testified in support. We will now turn to our opposition panel. We have 4 witnesses who have signed up to provide oral testimony, all as individuals, so they will each receive 2 minutes to provide their views, starting with Lori Halverson, followed by Brigida Mulliken, then Amy Waychoff, and Kathy Gujoulis. Ms. Halverson, would you like to begin?
Yes, good morning, everyone. I just wanted to say first, thanks to all of the delegates who are getting the communications out through your newsletters, especially Delegate Chi and Delegate Corman. I really appreciate getting your information, so thank you. And I strongly oppose this bill. And I also wanted to mention that the Maryland Federation of Republican Women strongly opposes this bill. I have sent a written testimony, so I hope you'll read that. I'm not going to read you the entire testimony, but I wanted to bring out some of the things that I hope will stick in your head. First is voter integrity is such an important issue right now, especially to Republicans. And this is not the time to change the way people vote in Maryland. I think our state was one of the only states in the country that I think people felt pretty comfortable with. I think it went fairly well. There's always things we can do to improve, but it's not a broken system in our state. So in our county either. So I just don't think we need to go that direction. Also, I wanted to, I just wonder how many constituents have come to you this year and said, hey, I really don't like the way we vote in our state, in our county. Please change how we do this. Or are you hearing more about the coronavirus and when are we going to get the vaccine and how can I get back to work? I mean, this is not a priority right now. Also, I wanted to give you a couple of analogies in basketball and in baseball. First, I'll start with the inside baseball. I feel like this is like inside baseball. It's if this bill passes, the county council members would be able to manipulate the method of voting, being able to choose the method that will favor their own odds, depending on who and how many opponents file to run. This just seems like inside baseball. Basketball. It's like you're trying to change how a basketball game winner is determined. Ranked choice voting is like determining the winner of a basketball game, not based on the end score, but on the number of minutes a team was ahead. I mean, and as the lady that spoke, Ms. Whitaker said, it's completely a different election system. It's something that's going to be very hard to understand. You all don't even understand it, which is very clear to me. How are regular voters going to understand ranked choice voting? It takes considerable education, and I just don't think it's the right thing to do, especially at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Halverson. We will now turn to Brigida Mulliken for 2 minutes, please.
Good morning, I'm Brigida Mulliken, and I'm testifying against the proposed House Bill 767, ranked choice voting. Most voters have no idea how this works. It is not a simple process. Many legislators can't explain how it works. Having too many different voting systems can be confusing, and it would require new voting programs costing new funds to train people how to use them. Have members in those various offices, which will be included on the ballot, been advised or educated on how ranked choice voting works? What do they believe? My main objections are the cost associated with this unnecessary change to the voting method and the complications of educating the voters about the system. It will require a lot of extra time to voters to complete their ballots. The Montgomery County budget is faced with budget shortfalls. The school budget is being squeezed and has had a problem with class sizes, especially with the COVID cost. What waste any county money on something not needed at this time when we have more pressing issues? This change would also require reprogramming the State Board of Election procedures and rewriting all the instructions. I believe ranked choice voting could decrease voter turnout, and only those who know the system will be the ones controlling the votes. This form of voting and its complexities will reduce confidence in the integrity of our election. and at least possibly increase the likelihood of ill-intentioned people from gaming the system. I strongly oppose ranked choice voting. I believe it is too difficult to understand, and it requires a lot of education, which would take resources away from more pressing issues. Please do not approve ranked choice voting, House Bill 767 at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mulliken. Turning to Amy Wachoff for 2 minutes, please. Is Ms. Wachoff on the line? I don't see her. Okay, we will go to Kathy Gagoulas, please, for 2 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing us to testify about this bill.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, can you hear me?
Wait,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Ms. Gagoulas, Ms. Wachoff just joined.
Yeah, I was here.
I know, I didn't see you and didn't come on when I asked. So we'll turn to you for 2 minutes and then we'll return to Mr. Julis. I apologize.
Thank you. My name is Amy Wyckoff, and I've lived in Montgomery County for over 33 years. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify. I'm opposed to MC 2221 or HB 767 for the following reasons. One study concluded that ranked choice voting, or RCV, does not ensure that the winning candidate will have received a majority of all votes cast, only a majority of all valid votes in the final round of tallying. For example, Tony Santos, mayor of San Leandro, California, lost his re-election bid in 2010 due to RCV. He was in the lead after the first round of voting. However, after 6 rounds, the winner held a majority over Santos, even though his share of the total votes cast was only 46%, not a majority. There is also a lack of elemental fairness in RCV. Let's say that the candidate you placed in the first spot on your ballot received the lowest amount of overall votes and was therefore scratched from every ballot. Under RCV, your second choice candidate is then turned into your top choice. It's as if you are given a second vote. Why should someone who voted for the most unpopular candidate in the first round get to influence the final election? RCV is expensive. Costs have been estimated at $1.7 million in Montgomery County alone. It would be more cost effective to hold a separate runoff election if the state wants to make sure the ultimate winner has a majority, as opposed to a plurality of the vote. In a traditional runoff, everyone knows who the candidates are and has an equal voice in the outcome. It is generally accepted that the higher the voter turnout, the more legitimate the election results. However, RCV is so confusing and convoluted that it would most likely lower turnout. In 2019, the governor of California vetoed an RCV bill, saying that where it has been implemented, I'm concerned that it has often led to voter confusion, and the promise that RCV leads to greater democracy is not necessarily fulfilled. Like the governor, I believe that RCV requires much more study before it is used more widely. I therefore respectfully request that you reconsider MC 22-21.
Thank you, Ms. Wyckoff. We will now turn to Ms. Gagoulas. I apologize. I'm certain I'm mispronouncing your name.
That's all right. It's Kathy Gagoulas. I've been a resident in Montgomery County for 42 years. I've been served as the chief election judge. I've worked at the polls. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify this morning in opposition to Bill MC 2221. Voters are concerned about the integrity of elections, as you well know. Introducing ranked choice voting and approval voting would further discourage voters from exercising their right by muddying the results of the elections. It would increase the already deep distrust that voters have in the election process. Instead of a straightforward election where the candidate that wins the most with the most votes wins, the electorate is being asked to trust some undefined process that some unknown officials will determine at some undefined point in the future. Frankly, I'm surprised that you, as our elected delegates, would be willing to risk your hard work trying to win votes in a process that it is best capricious. It's like putting names in a hat and asking someone to draw the winner, only no one knows who the person is that's drawing the name. Does that seem like election integrity to you? I realize that asking you to vote against your own bill may be futile, but I would ask you to carefully consider how this bill will jeopardize your own candidacies in the future of our election process. You know, there was a homeless man at the Silver Spring polls, the election polls this last cycle, and I talked to him about voting. He said he wasn't going to vote, and I said, why not? And he said something that I think is kind of profound. He said, elections, it's all an illusion. It's all an illusion. Please don't make this more of an illusion that some people already think it is. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We will now turn to questions from members of the delegation, starting with Majority Leader Ludke.
Thank you, Chair Shetty. Is Lori Halverson still on?
Yes, hi.
Hey, Lori, how you doing? It's good to see you. I was so, I take all of the criticisms here honestly, and I think there's valid disagreements about ranked choice voting, but throughout some of the conversations we've had in delegation about ranked choice voting and approval voting and different voting models, the Republican Party in the county has consistently been opposed, and so I wanted to try to talk that through a little bit because. I mean, first of all, I think election laws should be fair to everyone, right? Regardless of party. And, I'm a partisan Democrat who says that, right? But the Republican Party in the county hasn't elected an official since like 2006. And, so are there conversations going on within your party about whether the current voting system we have is contributing to that? And for example, let me give you an example where I ask, right? So the last county council election, in the general election, there were 3 candidates on the ballot, right? There was Mark Elrich, the Democratic candidate. There was Robin Ficker, the Republican candidate. And then there was an independent candidate who ran, right? And, arguably, the independent candidate and the Republican candidate split the anti-democratic vote in that race. Wouldn't ranked choice voting allow those voters who objected to, Mark Elrich being the county executive to have more of a say?
I don't think that this method, this ranked choice or approval voting, would help Republicans. I think it would hurt more, which I think is one reason why the Democrats like it so much. If you have a majority in your, if there's a majority Republican here, then the Republicans would be saying they want ranked choice voting. If the Democrats like it, because see, you're going to have, if you have a lot of people running, it could turn out, I think, where you would have 0 Republicans on the ballot. There could be, if it's a nonpartisan race, for example, that could, and we're trying to have a Republican elected in our county. I think it's been 2002 since we've had an elected, someone elected as a Republican. So I don't think it would help. This method would not help Republicans. I could see when you have that large amount of Democrats running, that the result may have been different if you had ranked choice voting. But I just don't think it's just not. I don't see how it's any more fair to change the system in such a radical way. I mean, it's really changing it so much that, and in the last bill, you had an amendment which you didn't include in this bill yet. I'm surprised you didn't add. I mean, it was already there last year. Why didn't you include it in your bill this year? The cost of and adding like education, because you're going to have to educate the public on, if you do adopt this bill. And you had estimated before it was going to be like over $200,000, but I argue that it'll cost a lot more to do that, to be able to adequately educate everyone. And do we need to use taxpayer dollars for something like that right now? I don't think so.
Sure. And these are all valid arguments. I mean, I'd just say, first of all, I don't think Delegate Acevero is introducing this bill because he thinks it'll help Democrats. In fact, I think there's a lot of people within our party who don't like RCV for various reasons. And I think what the advocates of this bill are trying to get to is a place where we have an electoral system that's truly representative. And I mean bluntly, and I say this as somebody who's proud to be a Democrat, right? We've got, I mean, what, 30% of the voters in the county are Republicans, and there are no Republican elected officials. Like that should be part of the conversation here. And maybe this isn't the way to do it, but I'd encourage the Federation and the Republican Party to sort of engage in the conversation from the perspective of, I think you've got people who genuinely want to make our system more, reflective of the will of the people. And I think it's not just here about partisanship. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions for our opposition panel? Okay, seeing none, we have thank you to those who have testified in opposition. We appreciate your viewpoints shared. We have 2 individuals who have signed up to testify to provide information. We have Amanda Lopez Askin from the Doña Ana County Clerk's Office, I believe she's an elected official, so she will get 5 minutes to testify. And then we have Chris Hughes from the RCV Resource Center who will get 3 minutes. So we will start with Ms. Askin, Ms. Lopez Askin, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Lopez Askin. I live in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and I am an elected official. I currently serve as the county clerk, so I appreciate the invitation. And I hear all these questions coming. I'm definitely going to leave the math to Chris for sure, because I'm really here to talk about the process as an election administrator and all the education pieces that kind of came into play. To give you some context, I live in very southern New Mexico, so I think people often think about New Mexico and think of Santa Fe. I'm actually about 300 miles south of Santa Fe, about 40 miles from El Paso, Texas, and the Mexican border. So we also are we have about 60% Latino population here, about 35% white, and then kind of, those are basically the two. Very few African Americans, very few Asians, and probably a little more Native American, just to give you some demographic information. We're also a college town. We're the home to New Mexico State University. When I came in to administer ranked choice voting, it was already something that was decided upon by the city council, the Las Cruces City Council. So in Doñana County, we're about 215,000 in our county, but the city of Las Cruces has about 60,000 voters. So I administered elections for all the municipalities, and Las Cruces had decided to enact ranked choice voting. So I first want to acknowledge some of the challenges that were definitely in place, and that was the big part of that was the voter education. As somebody who did not necessarily enact the way I would administer the election, there were those continual questions about how is this going on. But one thing I will say that I think I always defaulted to is I think we need to give voters more credit. Right. I think we need to recognize that they're invested in the system. Especially if they have a candidate they're supporting, I always give them the benefit of the doubt and think that they're going to do their due diligence and learn. Additionally, what I said to voters who were skeptical, angry, voters who, blamed me, really felt like, somehow the system was rigged, was I said to them, and the RCV people didn't necessarily love when I said this, is if you want to vote the way you have always voted, you should do that. If you have a single candidate that you want to vote for and you don't want to vote for anybody else, that is fine. That means you're not ranking your ballot. We had a 3-term incumbent mayor who was on the ballot. We also had additional 8 individuals who decided they wanted to run for mayor when ranked choice voting was enacted. So we had 9 total candidates. When I say, and we could talk about them in rounds, right? So, and I tried to be very simple with the voters because I tried to pretend that like I was learning about it consistently. And so every round is a ranking, right? And so in the last one drops off, and then those are redistributed, and then that one drops off until you get to, of course, the 50% plus 1 margin. Actually, it went through a full 9 rounds, which I believe is kind of unheard of in ranked choice voting. It did go through the full 9 rounds and ended up the incumbent mayor did win. I will say what it did, it engaged a lot more voters because they had more candidates. There was, they were able to reach voters that they maybe had never voted before. They had a more diverse, candidates, age-wise, ethnicity-wise. But what also ended up happening is the campaigning was less, there was less, vitriol, there was less part of that kind of, unfortunately, that comes with it. I saw one house that had 2 yard signs, one candidate for mayor and the other one for another. And you could tell that they were going to rank one of those 2. So some of those I just wanted to put out there because those were the initial questions that came up, and ultimately there was about a 4% increase in voter turnout in our community. And part of it was because of the discussion around ranked choice voting, that energy that it brought, people on either side, right? People very opposed to it or people like absolutely advocating for it, thinking it could engage people that historically had not been able to be part of the process, who historically had not been able to really be engaged. And so it did increase our voter turnout by about 4%. So there's, I could probably talk about this all day because it was a really interesting process for me. I had to learn it, but not only did I have to learn about it, I wanted people to vote, regardless of, you know, whether they hated it or loved it. And that's why I always gave them the option. If you want to vote what I called classic, vote who your number one person is and move on. But recognize when you do that, you will not be able to participate in the subsequent quote unquote runoffs, which was something that they were able to understand, I think, a little bit better.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I just have to take a second to acknowledge how cool it is that we have a witness from New Mexico who has joined us because of this virtual format that we're doing. I just think that we're gaining a lot of expertise that we might not have been able to lean on as a result. So I'm so grateful that you've taken the time, also recognizing that there's a time difference too in you participating. So we're really thankful that you got up extra early to share your expertise with us. So before we turn to questions, we do have one more witness who has offered to provide informational testimony, Mr. Hughes from the RCV Resource Center for 3 minutes, please.
Hi, good morning, delegates, and thank you for the opportunity to provide informational testimony. As I said earlier, my name is Chris Hughes, and I'm the Policy Director at the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center. We're a nonpartisan 501c3 nonprofit that provides information, resources, and tools to voters, election administrators, and policymakers about ranked choice voting. We're focused particularly on ranked choice voting implementation. So, you know, we studied a lot of what Amanda was talking about in Doña Ana in Las Cruces. And we look at every other ranked choice voting jurisdiction in the country to understand how ranked choice voting is being implemented and how voters are interacting with ranked choice voting across the country. So I wanted to just spend a bit of time talking about the voting equipment used in Maryland and to talk a bit about cost and voter education questions that have come up. So starting with voting equipment, all voting equipment in Maryland, including the equipment used in Montgomery County, is provided by a company called Election Systems and Software, or ES&S. The ES&S equipment used in Maryland, including that used in Montgomery County, can design ranked choice voting ballots and scan and capture votes cast on ranked choice voting ballots already. But ranked choice voting does require an additional tool to provide that round by round count that we've been talking about. ES&S provides a tool known as Express Runoff that can do this round by round count for single winner ranked choice voting elections. But as has already come up this hearing, there's also the potential for multi-winner ranked choice voting elections under this local option bill. We provide software known as the Ranked Choice Voting Universal Tabulator, which Michelle mentioned, that is compatible with this ES&S equipment with no changes to the ES&S equipment itself. That software can count any form of ranked choice voting, including single winner or multi-winner, any of the kinds that Delegate Moon was explaining as well. This tabulator has been tested by a federally accredited lab and is actually going to be used for ranked choice voting elections in New York this year in their single winner ranked choice voting elections. We also provide a results display website that's compatible with the results coming out of that tabulator software that is designed to clearly communicate these results to voters. Because as we've said, this is new. This is something people will need to learn about and wrap their heads around. It's not like they're going to learn it overnight, but we do know that people can understand this if they're given clear voter instructions on the ballot, if they're given clear results to understand. And we've done everything we can to create ballot design best practices and results best practices so that voters do feel empowered by the ranked choice voting ballot and understand the results. Because we do know it's possible. It's been done across the country. Voters can understand this thing, but you do need to be ready to explain this to voters using best practices. My time is up, but thank you so much for the opportunity to comment, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hughes, for your testimony. We do have a number of questions from members of the delegation. I'm going to do this in the order that I thought I saw them come in, so I apologize if I skip over anybody, but the order I have is Chair Barve, Chair Kaiser, Delegate Resnick, and Delegate Wilkins, and then anyone after that, I'll keep track. So starting with Chair Barve, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My first question is to Dr. Lopez-Askin. Doctor, are you administering ranked choice voting for single winner races or multi-winner races?
For single winner races.
Okay, great. And my last question is for Chris Hughes. Chris, 3 years ago, we had a multi-winner race for at-large county council that involved 30 candidates. And so what I would love is if you could could email to me and the delegation an example of what a multi-candidate ballot would look like if there were 30 plus candidates. Do you have 30 columns where you rank 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down to 30? What does it look like? I would love to see that, because personally, as you probably know, I'm a supporter of approval voting, because all you have to do is vote for like the 7 people you like, and it could use the same ballot that we have with just different instructions. But just do me a favor, email to me or the delegation what a multi-winner ranked choice voting ballot would look like for, let's just say, 30 candidates.
Yeah, sure. I can do that. I should say a single winner ranked choice voting ballot and a multi-winner ranked choice voting ballot look the exact same. There's no difference in the ballot. The action for the voter is the exact same. The thing that changes is how those votes get counted, as was being discussed earlier.
Well,
but yeah, I can provide that.
Number one, do you use your hand to write the number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4 next to the name? Is that how it works?
Unfortunately, so that's a technology called optical character recognition. That would be required in the voting equipment being used. That's not used in the United States yet, but that is how voters using ranked choice voting, both single winner and multi-winner, cast their ballots in places like Ireland and Scotland and Australia. But that's not how it would work here.
Well, then my request stands. If you could please give me an example of what a ballot for the Montgomery County Council at-large top 4 winners would look like if we had 30 candidates.
Yeah, I can grab a couple examples of ballots with large candidate fields and send them over to you. And we can also produce an example ballot, sort of like a mock-up of what the ballot would look like for that contest in particular, the one you're talking about, but that may take a bit more time to get over to you.
That's fine.
Mr. Hughes, I would ask if you could please send that to Rebecca Stryer, our delegation administrator, and then she can distribute it most efficiently to the members of the delegation.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Okay, we will go to Chair Kaiser now.
Thank you, Chair Shetty. My question is for Dr. Lopez Askin. First, I want to compliment you. I love that your county requires you to take a leave of absence before your opposed elections. So that's just an added thing about perception and election integrity that, of course, everyone here cares so much about. I was hearing the other party cares election integrity, but I believe everyone cares about election integrity. My question is, I also heard the opposition here today talking about this magical formula and this hat and picking out of a hat and the randomness. I would like to understand how you make it easy in your county, in your jurisdiction, to ensure that people can themselves understand the validity of the counting and how they themselves can look at it and see the program used, and that the data can be replicated by anyone who has all the inputs.
Well, I mean, in terms of ensuring, that they understood the process, I did as well as I could do, considering that ultimately, I think there's who are just opposed to change. They don't want the system to change. They're satisfied with the current process. And there's, especially now, we have to acknowledge that there tends to be some suspicion. So I tried to simplify it as much as I could in terms of, and not because I didn't think that voters could understand going into the weeds. I just didn't think that it would be that helpful in terms of them, kind of grasping it. I don't know, I can't share my screen. If I could, I would show you some of the, well, at least one kind of pamphlet, and I could send that after.
I'm less concerned on the front end. I'm concerned on the back end. After the results come out, and however the results are audited, are people, how is that done to ensure confidence from people? The way the process was done within the computer system to do the elimination and to add new people. I would like to think that anyone could replicate it if they knew the method being used.
So I will say in New Mexico, I'm very grateful, and I hope we always maintain hand-marked paper ballots. So, any race that we have can always be replicated and through any kind of audit. And so that would include if somebody wanted to do it by hand with ranked choice voting, which would take quite a long time. But our vendor, who Dominion, is the vendor that we utilized that had administered ranked choice voting within their programming, so to speak. What we have, and I wouldn't be surprised if you had something similar in Maryland, is we have a machine check that's a transparent process in which we invite the public to. It's we post it, and every iteration of the ballot goes through each of our machines to ensure its accuracy. Our machines are not able to be as most are not able to be connected to the internet. And once they are certified, they are sealed and opened by a poll official. And so, I guess I'm having problems grasping how it can always be replicated in terms of an audit. There was a candidate who was not happy, who believed that he was disenfranchised. And I kind of went into some of the math as much as I could and explained, he did well after the third or fourth ranking. He dropped off, meaning he did not continue to get, the rankings of folks, or they stopped ranking and they didn't rank him really. I found that it helped to talk about it in rounds connected to runoff and instant runoff. People seem to understand runoffs much better because that's something historically that's happened. There was a post-election survey that was done for those who were walking out, and people over 60% liked the process. Over 60% thought that they, that they understood it well. And so, as far as the process in which they understood it, they said that they did. And because the results can always be replicated in audit, if there was ever any question, then, that is something that somebody could pursue if they had specific questions and complaints. And I hope I answered that question. It's kind of something that it's kind of hard to wrap my hands around and show you because it's also public opinion. There's still some that have no faith in it and don't want it and want it to be repealed. But that's not going to happen anytime soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Delegate Resnick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Delegate Barbe asked my question, but with that, I'd like to add more homework to Mr. Hughes's current roster. In addition to that ballot that shows the multi-member race of the 30 candidates and how that would look, could you also provide for me a step-by-step process for how that would be calculated? How the winner would be calculated, or the winners would be calculated in that multi-member race?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I can write something up. I can't do it based on the results. I can try and mock something up based on the results from that county commission election, but it is hard to estimate how voters would have ranked when they weren't.
The hypothetical one is probably.
Yeah, I'd like to see the process. I don't need to know the winner of that particular race. I want to know step by step how that
How's it working?
Is counted. Which votes are dropped off, which votes are resorted, how that works.
Absolutely.
Race. Thank you.
Okay, and similarly, Mr. Hughes, if you can provide that to Rebecca, she can then distribute it to members of the delegation, because I believe that we likely have a number of people who would love to see that. Thank you so much, Delegate Resnick. Delegate Wilkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to join everyone in just thanking Ms. Lopez-Askin for her time this morning. Really appreciate your expertise and sharing your experience with this. My question for both Mr. Hughes and Ms. Lopez-Askin is about the impact on electing diverse candidates and for what the observations are that you have seen in terms of ranked choice voting. For Ms. Lopez-Askin, I know you mentioned that the area is 60%, I think Latino is what you said. So maybe that's a bit different from Montgomery County, but I think I'm interested in any observations you may have seen as it relates to diversity of candidates. And also for Mr. Hughes, if there are jurisdictions or places that are similar to Montgomery County, that would be really helpful to know about.
So I can talk about, we did have, out of 9 candidates, I think the majority of the candidates were Latino. One of the interesting things that was highlighted in media here was that we had the youngest candidate that had ever run for mayor. He was 19 years old. He was a local realtor. He was engaged in all of the debates. And what I thought he brought was a whole host of voters that may have not been in tune to the election that decided to participate this year. Now, they may have just voted for him and moved on, but the fact that they were engaged in the electoral process always, means that they're much more likely to continue to do so. We had, again, I think the discussion around changing the status quo and how ranked choice voting is concerning to some people. I think at the end of the 9 rounds, when we had, I believe he was a 3-term incumbent mayor, won. It kind of may dispel some of that, but we know that on some level he received the majority of support from, most people in our community, right? 50% plus 1. So I do believe, based on what the research tells me and based on my experience, that it does engage more individuals in a more a better process of really understanding that they could actually be a candidate, that they could see themselves leading their community in a way maybe they hadn't before. Because if it was just maybe the incumbent mayor and maybe somebody who'd run before, they may not enter their race, but they thought, oh, there may be a seat here for me, and maybe I won't win, but maybe it'll give me confidence to run next time and win. So that for me, specifically connected to age, but also ethnicity here, I would say I believe it did do that, in terms of the diversity of candidates.
Yeah, and I can speak a bit about the research done, papers published on this question, and I can also speak a bit about what I've heard anecdotally from candidates in places like the Bay Area and the Twin Cities, which have been using ranked choice voting now for a number of years. So the first thing is there's been a really detailed study done of the Bay Area, of the cities in the Bay, Berkeley, Oakland, San Leandro, and San Francisco, that use ranked choice voting to elect their city councils and other local elected offices. There is a correlation there between the adoption of ranked choice voting in each of those cities and an increase both in candidates of color running for election and an increase in candidates of color winning election. And that's an increase both in candidates of color winning election in districts that are majority people of color, as well as in districts that are majority white with a substantial population comprised of people of color. So there's both candidates of color are winning both in districts where they are providing descriptive representation to the voters and in crossover districts where there's a mix of multiple different races forming coalitions essentially and electing candidates of color to elect them in ranked choice voting elections. And it's at such a rate in those cities that it's correlated to the adoption of ranked choice voting. There's other cities in the Bay Area that have not seen as substantial an increase in representation in the number of candidates of color running and winning. And those cities don't have ranked choice voting. And additionally, I've just heard from candidates who ran in the Bay Area. There's these press releases and press conferences coming out of the Twin Cities, out of Minneapolis and St. Paul, where candidates of color in particular, like Dr. Askin was saying, were saying, I ran because I felt like ranked choice voting sort of opened up the space for me to run. I felt like I wouldn't be running as a spoiler if I was running in a ranked choice voting election because my voters could still have their vote transfer to another candidate if I didn't have enough votes to win. And we've heard that story again and again coming out of ranked choice voting jurisdictions.
Thank you. Really quickly, Mr. Hughes, if you don't mind sending that research along with your long list of items that you're sending, I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Delegate, and thank you, Dr. Askin and Mr. Hughes, for your answers. Delegate Acevero for questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to really quickly just reiterate, because I know we've been having such a really spirited discussion, and I appreciate and value the input of all of my colleagues, including the experts that we had come out today to sort of speak to ranked choice voting. But I just wanted to reiterate for the viewers at home and for the folks here that this is enabling legislation. It in no way sets up a new electoral system. It in no way institutes ranked choice voting. What this bill in essence does is gives the authority of our county leaders, duly elected by the people of our county, if they so choose, to bring up this issue, to have a debate about it, to look at what system would work best for our county that we all live in, and to ultimately pass legislation and implement a system if they so choose. This does not create any new system. It does not allow candidates to be chosen from a hat. It does not do anything like that at all. So I just wanted to reiterate that because I thought it was important, and I appreciate the input and all the information that the experts are going to provide us. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Isn't that so?
Isn't that so?
Right, thank you.
All right. Do any other members of the delegation have questions for our informational witnesses who have been so generous with their time and will be getting back to us with a lot of homework? Seeing none, thank you so much, Delegate Acevero, for raising this bill before us. We are scheduled for a work session with EEH next Wednesday morning to continue to work on this. We appreciate everybody's time. I will turn the floor over to Chair Corman.
Thank you, Chair Shetty. Thank you, everybody, for that robust public hearing. We're now going to turn to our local fiscal briefing. Before we do, I will probably have to hand the gavel over to Vice Chair Carr as this is going because of a slight scheduling issue. But with that, let me turn it over to our friends at the Department of Legislative Services for the annual local fiscal briefing.
Okay, good morning. I'm Hiram Birch with DLS, and with me today is Arnold Aja. He is a graduate of the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and he's working towards his Master's of Public Policy degree at the University of Maryland, College Park. And this year, he's assisting the Maryland General Assembly as a legislative fellow. And he is also a resident of Montgomery County. So I'm going to turn the briefing over to Mr. Aja.
Good morning, Chair and members of the Montgomery County House Delegation. We provided you with two reference materials. One is the overview of state aid to local governments, and the other is a reference guide to access all of our local government reports. For this briefing, I will direct your attention to the overview report. We will concentrate on three themes. We will start with a brief overview of the state aid to Montgomery County. Then we will look at the major programs affecting county and municipal governments. And finally, we will end with the aid to the public school system. Moving to page 3. Page 3 shows the allocation of state funding by jurisdiction. State aid to local governments will total $8.7 billion in fiscal 2022. Of this amount, Montgomery County will receive $1.1 billion. This represents a $31.5 million increase, or a 3% increase from the prior year, slightly above the state average of 2.7%. Pages 4 through 6 provide more detail on the level of state funding in fiscal 2021 and 2022 by unit of local government. On page 4, you can see that $828.3 million of the $1.1 billion in state aid to Montgomery County will go to the public school system. County and municipal governments will receive $32.9 million. Page 6 shows the dollar difference between the fiscal 2022 allowance and the fiscal 2021 appropriation. The public school system is stated to get $24 million, and county and municipal governments will receive approximately $1 million in additional aid. Turning to page 8, the governor is proposing several reductions in state funding to local governments, which are accounted for in the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act and are seen in the numbers that you have just seen. The two major reductions affecting Montgomery County are the Community College Aid Program and property tax assessment costs. Of the 26.6 million reduction under the Community College CADE program, Montgomery County's loss is $4.8 million. Even with the reduction in statutory funding, the community college will still receive a $2.3 million increase, which is a 4% increase, 4.6% increase from the prior year. The second major action is changing the cost share of property tax assessments. Currently, the state and county governments share these costs 50-50. The governor is proposing to alter this to 60% local and 40% state. This will cause a $3.9 million increase in assessment costs in fiscal 2022. Montgomery County's costs will be $500,000. By fiscal 2025, the locals will be expected to cover 90% of these costs, with the government expected to pay $15.8 million. Montgomery County's share will be $2.3 million. Now, we will shift our focus to some of the major aid programs to county and municipal governments. You can see on page 12, jurisdictions in Montgomery County will receive $16.4 million in police aid in fiscal 2022. Page 13 shows the factors affecting the police aid funding. Primarily, your population density and your county population is what is driving the funding amount each jurisdiction receives. Page 14 shows the targeted crime grant funding. Around $15.4 million is provided for statewide funding. The remaining $20 million is received by Baltimore City and Prince George's County. Page 15 shows the allocation of fire and rescue aid. Montgomery County will receive $2 million in fire and rescue aid. Page 16 shows the allocation of local health grants. Montgomery County will receive $4.3 million in local health grants. Moving on to page 19. Page 19 shows the county and municipal share of highway user revenues. The county government will receive $8.1 million, and the municipalities will receive $6 million. Now I'm going to turn your focus to education aid. As shown on page 16, local school systems in Montgomery County will receive over $990 million in state funding in fiscal 2022. Page 27 shows a breakdown of the direct aid and retirement payments. $828.3 million is for direct aid, which pays for operating expenses within the classroom. In addition, $162.2 million is provided for teacher retirements. For the direct aid, most of the funding is based on student enrollment and local wealth. The less wealthy jurisdictions receive relatively more state aid. Whereas for teacher retirements, the funding is based on the teacher salaries base and the number of positions. It is not based on local wealth. Page 28 puts the education aid on a per pupil basis. On a per pupil basis, Montgomery County receives $6,319. Page 30 shows the components of the foundation program. As you can see, the foundation program totals $3.4 billion in fiscal 2022. Of this amount, Montgomery County receives $423.6 million. This is the main education funding formula that provides state aid to help cover overall costs for the school system. Page 31 puts the foundation program on a per pupil basis. Montgomery County will receive $2,702 per pupil, below the state average of $4,000. Page 32 shows the aid under the Blueprint initiatives in fiscal 2022. Blueprint initiatives funding totals $497.4 million And of this amount, Montgomery County will receive $51.4 million. On page 33, you can see the hold harmless grants that the governor is providing. In fiscal 22, Montgomery County will receive $29.7 million, and this grant will offset the $29.6 million decrease in funding from the education aid formulas that is due to a decline in student enrollment. As you can see on page 34, the funding under the targeted student populations grants totals $1.9 billion in fiscal 2022. Of this amount, Montgomery County will receive $255.3 million. Turning to page 35, just like other aid programs, funding for targeted student population uses a funding formula that incorporates local wealth. Montgomery County has a relatively high share of targeted student populations, which enables the county to rank 14th in per pupil aid. On page 36, you can see that Montgomery County is slightly below state average in free and reduced price meals, above average in English language learners, and at the state average for students receiving special education services. We will briefly present you information on local wealth and student enrollment, and these factors help to explain the level of state education aid for local school systems, for the local school system. On page 37, you can see that Montgomery County has the 4th highest per pupil wealth index. This year, the index increased by 4.1%, slightly below state average. School systems with high per pupil wealth tend to receive less aid than systems with low per pupil wealth. Page 43 shows you the change in student enrollment. You can see that the 2.3% decrease in student enrollment is comparable to the state average. If you turn to page 44, you will see that under 1/3 or 30% of public school students in Montgomery County are approved for free and reduced price meals, which is below the state average of 40%. As you can see on page 45, Montgomery County has the 2nd highest share of English language learners in Maryland, representing over 16% of student enrollment. Finally, on page 46, you can see that 12.9% of public school students in Montgomery County are receiving special education services, which is comparable to the state average. Thank you very much. And while this presentation touched on some of the highlights, please feel free to contact us if you would like additional information. Now we will open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Raja. Thank you, Mr. Birch, for this excellent presentation. Do any legislators have questions for our DLS folks? Okay, please raise your hand using the raise hand feature. I am not seeing any questions. Anyone have any questions? Oh, we do have a question from Delegate Acevedo.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I just wanted to thank Mr. Arnold Adja for the very concise, very informative briefing. Appreciate that. I remember he was an IGR intern. Didn't speak much, but congratulations and appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Delegate Acevedo. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we will now move on to committee announcements. Chair Shetty.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair Carr, appreciate it. The Education, Elections, and Housing Committee will be meeting at Wednesday virtually at 9:30 a.m. to have a work session and possible vote session on Delegate Acevero's bill.
Thank you, Chair Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Land Use, Transportation, and Public Safety Committee will not be meeting on Monday. Thank you so much to all members for their hard work.
Chair Chi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Economic Development Committee does not have upcoming meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. And the Metropolitan Washington Committee does not have plans to meet on Monday. So that concludes our meeting for this morning. Thank you very much and have a great Friday.